Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our second edition of What's Cooking at the Capitol with me. Shout out to Catherine Lewin for that wonderful theme song that we added this week, and we're glad to have you here in the kitchen. We've got a great episode planned for you today. We're going to be covering this week's action, what was cooking up at the State House here in Iowa. We're going to be doing a deep dive on one of the key ingredients in CCI's recipe for justice, and we're going to take a look at what's coming up ahead at the Capitol next week. But first, we're going to be talking pancakes. I love pancakes. I don't know. It's like, who doesn't love pancakes? Even for breakfast, for brunch, for lunch, breakfast, for dinner, you name it. There's no bad time to have a pancake. My grandma Lavina, used to make these really, really thin Danish pancakes, almost like a crepe, and we would roll them up with butter and sugar and cinnamon. My dad made pancakes from the box. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I really perfected my recipe for buttermilk pancakes. But today we're going to try something fun in the kitchen. We are going to make a Dutch baby. I've had my cast iron skillet here heating up in the oven. I'm going to add a half a stick of butter. Now the cool thing about Dutch baby is that it looks really cool. It's going to puff up. It's going to steam itself from the inside as I cook it in the oven. You can serve them with syrup just like you would, powdered sugar. You can add fresh fruit, frozen fruit. You can even make them savory, add some bacon and some herbs. But we've got our butter melting here. And I'm just going to stick that back in real quick to heat it up. Again, this looks really, really cool. But what's awesome is it's super, super easy. Half cup of milk, couple eggs, half cup of flour, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of salt, a little bit of nutmeg. Whip it up real good. We're going to take our skillet back out. Get that butter nice and melted. All right. A lot of butter, half stick. That's what makes it taste good, I think. And now, I'm just going to take my batter here, add it in. All right. So, in terms of what's been cooking up at the Capitol, we saw a lot of committee action this week. Third week of the legislative session. That goes into the preheated oven at 425. And let's talk State House. What's cooking at the Capitol? A lot of State House action, a lot of key subcommittee work, a lot of committee work, lots more bills being introduced. Key debate started happening. We saw a number of non-controversial provisions, just little tweaks to his existing law passing. But something you've probably seen in the news is both chambers have passed a resolution expanding gun rights. This is going to be a constitutional amendment to expand the right to bear arms in Iowa. There was an amendment to clarify whether or not we wanted to just mirror language that's in the U.S. Constitution. This amendment goes beyond that. And of course, now that it's passed both chambers in consecutive years, this will be on the ballot in 2022 for voters to decide whether or not we amend the Constitution. There's also a push, of course, to add abortion to a ban on abortion to the Constitution. A number of allies are leading that fight. It has passed the House. It still has to pass the Senate. And fortunately, this will not be on the ballot in 2022. It will have to pass in a consecutive legislative session. So the soonest that this abortion ban would be on the ballot for voters is 2024. So check out some allies like Planned Parenthood, One Iowa, groups like that are doing the good work on that. The big attention that we were tracking this week at the State House, of course, was kids, COVID, and Kim Reynolds. The governor's made it clear that she has a priority. She is hell-bent on really forcing schools to open back up mandatorily, whether or not we have the protections we need in place, and of course is moving forward with a plan to create a voucher program, transferring lots of public money to private schools. The first thing, the so-called Return to Learn, has passed both chambers, and I just got a news alert this morning that this has actually signed that. That's Senate File 160 that passed both chambers this week. And again, Democrats really fought this to make it clear that we should have the protections in place. But what this bill does is it mandates that every school across the state has to in-person option 5 days a week for students to go back to school, whether or not we have the needed protections in place. The other thing that's still on that's on the front burner at the Capitol is Senate File 159. This is the governor's signature education plan. And at the heart of this is creating a public voucher system where if you would like to open enroll your kids into a different school system, the state's funding in support of those students goes with them. Ultimately, it's creating a voucher program. Again, this is Senate File 159. It passed the Senate 26-21, so 3 Republicans joined Democrats in opposing that. The big concern here is that it's going to take a lot of money away from our public schools. We all pay taxes into a common public pot to support our public schools, but listen to these numbers. We're talking about a loss of revenue for our local schools of $2.1 million in the first year, $3 million in the second year, $3.8 million in the third year of this plan. They're saying that especially larger school districts like Des Moines could stand to lose up to $1.5 million. Davenport schools, $780,000. Waterloo schools, nearly $500,000. Combined across the state, our public schools are looking at losing at least $3.5 million. And what we're saying about this really is that our public dollars need to support public education. We know that public schools are required to admit and serve all students. This legislation is going to divert that public money to non-public schools who are not required to serve all of our students. We believe, the fact that these are public funds means that we have accountability through our public school boards. There's transparency. Non-public schools aren't held to those same standards. So this is a huge concern, and in the banner there, you saw a chance for you to take action. You can contact your legislators. We're also joining with allies across the state on Monday for Moral Mondays at the Capitol. That'll be a virtual rally where we'll hear from legislators and the teachers union who is leading up the charge on this. So I hope you can join us for that on Monday. Now, I mentioned a couple other bad bills that we are tracking here at CCI. And again, if you join our email mailing list, you'll get a weekly roundup of all the bills that we're tracking and ways that you can take action. But today we're going to focus on a couple racial justice issues. We've seen a number of bills to crack down on criminal protest, on protest organizers, and silence dissent. A lot of this is new, but we're seeing even more of it this year in the wake of landmark organizing that has sprung up over the last year in response to police violence. So today, I'm pleased to welcome to the kitchen Lori Young. Lori is a SI Action member from here in Des Moines. She's our first guest on What's Cooking at the Capitol. Lori, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be with you.
Yeah. So I'm really excited today because we get to dig in on a couple bills, and you're one of the most expert people I know on these issues. We've seen some bills addressing police violence, both good and bad, but I want to talk about some of the good ones today. And one of the good ones that CCI Action is supporting is a bill to mandate police body cameras across the state, House File 43. Now, we support this, but we know that body cameras aren't a silver bullet. Can you tell me why body cams aren't enough and what we really need?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. It's good to be with you. I really appreciate the invite. To answer your question, yes, body cams are an important step, Adam, but I remember when we didn't have them and police misconduct, excessive force wasn't captured at all. And then we had the proliferation of cell phone cameras, which allowed some of the misbehavior to be captured, but not all. So this legislation is important. However, I do want to state, there's always a however. What we really need to do is curtail the bad behavior of some cops in the first place. So if they weren't behaving badly, right, there'd be nothing to see. So when officers conduct bogus pretextual stops or pedestrian stops or escalate seemingly routine traffic stops, or even, God forbid, use unnecessary or excessive force, that's what needs to end. When Black and brown people's constitutional rights are violated with unwarranted or illegal searches, that's what really needs to end. So statewide body cam mandate is great. But let's not make the rules around getting that footage difficult or cumbersome, which can tend to happen. In fact, I know of a recent case in Des Moines where a Black man who requested the body cam footage for his traffic stop under the Freedom of Information Act, he was denied access to that footage. Now, he was not arrested, nor was he ticketed at the traffic stop, but he felt it was unjust and racially biased. So now he's got to seek legal counsel to demand to get the body cam footage released. And finally, I'd like to add, if I can, Adam, that I'm really proud of a successful lawsuit that was waged by Iowa CCI and racial justice team member Harvey Harrison against the Des Moines Police Department last year. Harvey sued the Des Moines Police Department because they refused to release body cam footage of a 2018 violent arrest of Brian Bell, a Black man. And the judge agreed with Harvey's claim, and the Des Moines Police Department paid a fine and had to pay for Harvey's attorney's fees. So hopefully that will be a precedent setting. So we do applaud statewide body cam footage body cam mandate for police officers and law enforcement, but let's make sure that we stop the bad behavior in the first place.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. One of the other key priorities that we're focusing on this legislative session actually comes out of the work that you and the racial justice team have been leading up at CCI. And that's building on the start of banning racial profiling. We've started to do that here in Des Moines, but we know that we need to do this statewide. And we're actually working with a couple key allies. Senator Bolton in Iowa City has introduced Senate File 198. Bruce Hunter here in Des Moines has introduced House File 130. And we know that Phyllis Thiede in the Quad Cities is working on a ban on racial profiling with us too. Now, some CCI members or folks today never support themselves. Me being one of them, right? Iowa is a pretty white state. In fact, some folks may not even think that racial profiling happens in their community. Can you tell me why we should all be fighting to ban racial profiling?
Sure. Yeah. I am really happy about the legislation that's being considered right now and being introduced by our legislators. Yeah, and you're right. In Iowa, there is only 4% Blacks in our total state population. In Des Moines, we're only 11%. Blacks are only the 11% of the population. So why should a non-Black or non-brown person fight against racial profiling? Why should they even care? Well, my answer to that is from a merely ethical or moral point of view, racial profiling is wrong. It's wrong for police to treat Black and brown people differently, to even violate their constitutional and human rights simply because their skin is Black or brown. You've heard the saying, skin color is not reasonable suspicion, right? So these injustices must not continue because it creates a climate of irrational fear, distrust, and division among people. Dr. Martin Luther King said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And look at what happened on January 6th. White nationalists and white supremacists stormed our United States Capitol. Over 5 people were killed. Several police officers were severely wounded. Who would have thought of that? Now white people, elected officials, are fearing for their lives at the hands of other white people. So that's why we've got to keep justice for all a reality. And in Iowa, our state motto is, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. Whose liberties and whose rights? Is it only for white people? When Black people are not free to move around and pursue life and happiness, when they are targeted and suspected for no reason, that's not right. It's not just. Now, here's another reason why people should care and want to fight against racial profiling. Economically, bad policing, racially biased policing, is ineffective and costly. Why does the Des Moines Police Department need a $72 million budget to police a city of no more than 225,000 people? Des Moines Police the Des Moines Police Department has settled several lawsuits, not admitting guilt, settled out of court, totaling nearly $1.5 million just in the last few years. That's our money. That's taxpayer money. So, in fact, and I'm going to share a little bit of information with your viewers that might not be aware. The Des Moines Police Department, and we're talking about state legislation, but this is our capital city, Des Moines. In fact, the Des Moines Police Department has what they call a special enforcement team, and they only operate from April through September each year, specifically tasked to catch people with drugs and guns. And there's about 10 to 12 officers on this special team. Now, here's some staggering statistics. From 2016 through 2020, the Des Moines Police Department, their special enforcement team, made 6,591 stops. And out of all those stops, they only collected marijuana 308 times. That's 4.7%. And of only 21 stops of the 6,591 stops resulted in marijuana being collected in an amount greater than 100 grams, which is a widely accepted dividing point between personal use and dealer amounts. That's less than 1% productivity. So while Blacks are 11% of Iowa's population, of Des Moines' population, we are 30% of those arrested for marijuana. Is this a good use of police officers' time? Is this a good use of taxpayers' hard-earned money? No, not to mention the cost to incarcerate Black and brown men and women for months or years on petty amounts of recreational levels of marijuana. These are nonviolent crimes. So there's just a couple of economic reasons racially biased policing is bad if you don't and can't relate to the moral and ethical reasons.
That's so right on, Lori. And, that's absolutely correct. I think of, when I think about our vision and our values at Iowa CCI, I know we believe that Iowa should be a welcoming place and that we truly believe in the greater pieces of our founding. Now, I know that, our country has flaws in its foundation, and that Black and brown folks especially have always been victims of systemic racism. So this is one more way that we can correct those flaws of our history and fight for the Iowa that we really need to see. Last question for you today is, what can folks do to support the ban on racial profiling and get involved both at the State House or in their own community?
Yeah, you know what? I hope a lot of your viewers are already CCI members, but if you're not, you need to join with organizations like Iowa CCI and Iowa CCI Action, because first of all, they're going to keep you plugged in, just like this show is doing, Adam, which is so great. I love this show. Because you can be kept up to date. You've got to educate yourself about systemic racism. You've got to understand how it started in America and how it still plagues us. So read. There's tons of information, books out there about systemic racism and the history of policing in our country. So get educated, bring yourself up to speed on that. Stay connected with a group like Iowa CCI, CCI Action, because they're going to keep you informed. On an individual basis, when CCI does a call to action, show up. Get involved, if that's signing a petition or emailing your legislator or calling your legislator, whether at the state or federal or national level. Do those things because they do make a difference. And I think, examine yourself and see where, because we all have implicit bias and prejudices that we have bought into. Examine yourself. And finally, when you hear or see racist things happening, speak up. If you can be safe in that, speak up and counter those conversations and those actions. And this could happen at your dining room table over a holiday meal. It could happen at your church when you overhear racist things being uttered. It's up to each one of us to cut it off at the head.
That's absolutely right, Lori. Thank you so much for bringing all of this great information to us today, and to all of our friends on What's Cooking today. Really appreciate it. Look forward to continue to organize with you and fight for the Iowa we need. So thank you, Lori.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Yep. All right. So what's coming up next week? And let's just check real quick. How's this Dutch baby doing? Oh, wow. Yeah, you're going to like this, folks. All right. So you can see this here. We've got crispy edges. We've got a nice little brown top. I'm going to let this sit for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to come back, and we are going to, today we're just going to use a little powdered sugar to make it look pretty. So what's coming up next week? There's going to be a lot more subcommittee action, a lot of committee action. Of course, Senate File 159 that I mentioned. Join us on Monday for Moral Monday. Take action on that, because this public school vouchers, using our public tax dollars to prop up private schools, it's going to be moving next week. Beyond that, the week after, we've got a big week of action planned on our farm and environmental issues. There's a week of action from February 8th through the 12th for a factory farm moratorium, one of our big priorities going into this legislative session. There's a link there for you to RSVP. We're going to be discussing this year's factory farm moratorium bill, providing trainings on lobbying and getting the word out in your community, putting some real pressure on our state legislators to address Iowa's factory farm crisis and the clean water crisis across our state. So sign up there. You're not going to want to miss it. Trust me. I'm hoping that you'll join me again next week for What's Cooking at the Capitol. Next week, we're going to take a deeper look at an ingredient that is the root of all of the issues that we fight on: voter justice and the democratic process. We believe in getting money out, putting people in. We believe in an Iowa and a nation where every voter counts and every vote counts. So we're going to be digging in and cook up some voter justice for ourselves next week. And as we wind out today, I'm going to take a little bit of powdered sugar here. And again, if you try and make this at home, you saw that I was able to cook this in 20 minutes with you today. Just give it a good look there. You can just cut it into wedges, but it's just that easy, presents really well. I think I'm going to be making this more often now. You can throw some jam, some jelly, frozen fruit, fresh fruit, make it savory with a little bit of bacon. It's going to be great. I can't wait to take a bite. So until next week, sign up for our emails, plug in, lots of ways to take action, and I can't wait to see you next week on What's Cooking at the Capitol.